Hello, this channel suggests that we alter history or we select history through quantum collapse. And to select a history, to select the one world that we know and love from ever many worlds, we have to alter the Born rule to include expectations from across space-time. So I call that the Born-Hilborn rule because I've added some math to the Born rule to resolve, in this video, the evil and suffering problem using the Born-Hilborn rule. The faith mechanics, worry and the weight of thought. The oldest attack on God is very simple. If God exists, why is there suffering? Why the sick children? Why starvation? Why fear? Why cruelty? Why does the world look as if love is built in it, but panic keeps sneaking into the wiring? Materialism has one answer. There is no higher meaning. Matter bumps into matter, biology suffers, and then we pretend poetry helps. Some people drink. Traditional religion often has another answer. God has mysterious reasons. Trust the plan. My answer is different. God does not work in mysterious ways. God works through collapse in mathematical ways. Reality is selected by expectation-weighted collapse across space-time. The Born rule was incomplete because it treated collapse as probability. The Born-Hilborn rule adds that what was missing, the weight of expectation, faith, fear, desire, worry, and thought across the entire block universe. So there is no now moments. So the problem of evil is not solved by saying God wanted children to suffer. No, in this interpretation, suffering is what happens when fear, worry, and negative expectation receive enough weight to help select painful histories. That is the mechanism. Worry is not harmless. Worry is visualized fear with emotional fuel. Worry is bad manifestation practice. Worry is faith and disaster. That is why in this model, worry is the root of all evil. Not because worried people are bad people. That would be stupid, cruel, and useless. Worried people are often loving people trying desperately to protect what they love, but mechanically, worry still does damage because it gives emotional weight to the very history it fears. They are kind of bad people. You have to learn to control your worry and step away from it. Distract. Fears is the terrible trap. You desire something good even, and instantly worry attaches itself to the desire. It's catch-22, the original sin. You want health, then fear sickness. Desire has evil attached. You want love, then you fear abandonment. If you want food, then you fear hunger. Desire has evil attached. Worry is evil. You want your child safe, then picture the accident. You want peace, then rehearse catastrophe. That is the original sin in the Born-Hilborn mathematics. Original sin is not a baby being guilty because of an apple story. Original sin is worry attached to desire. The moment a conscious being wants anything, even an apple, it can imagine losing it. That imagined loss gains emotional force. That force becomes expectation weight. That expectation weight enters collapse, quantum collapse, and then mankind stares at the suffering it helped weight into history and says, how could God allow this? God did not sit on a cloud and order cancer for the child. That is not the model. The model says reality is a shared mental space-time and histories are selected by accumulated expectation. Bad histories become possible when worry, terror, resentment, and despair feed them with enough weight. This is why faith matters. Faith is not believing nonsense because a priest threatened you. Faith is disciplined expectation. Faith is refusing to donate collapse weight to the history you do not want to live. Faith is the art of holding the better branch steady. Let us make this simple with Schrodinger's cat. Before the box is open, the cat exists in a superposition of possible histories. A live cat history, dead cat history. Not merely two endings, but two full storylines. One history contains an alive cat all the way back, an untriggered poison mechanism, and the chain of events that supports life. The other contains a dead cat and the chain that supports death all the way back. All the way back in to the beginning of time, to the beginning of the birth of the universe. Standard quantum mechanics says probability chooses, that it's random. There's 36% of physicists today say that our history is created randomly in the Copenhagen interpretation. If you think about the collapse as history selection or random. The Born-Hilborn says expectations help choose. So imagine two Schrodingers. One Schrodinger opens the box with calm expectation. He expects life. He expects the cat to be well. He does not worship the dead cat branch with emotional panic. He does not worry. That does not guarantee the outcome like a cheap magic trick, but in this model it biases collapse toward the alive cat history. Now imagine another Schrodinger. He worries violently. He imagines the dead cat. He rehearses the grief. He feeds the feared branch with emotional certainty. He says, I just know something awful has happened. In Born-Hilborn mechanics, that is not neutral. That is not private. That is weight. If the cat is found dead, his family might look at him and say, what did you do? And that sounds harsh, but it teaches the point. Worry is not morally innocent because it is emotionally understandable. Worry is faith pointed at hell. This is why Jesus treats worry like poison. When Peter tries to steer Jesus away from Jerusalem out of fear, Jesus says, get behind me, Satan. Why such a sharp response? Because fear was trying to select a smaller history. Worry was speaking through love and calling itself wisdom. When the disciples worry there was not enough food, Jesus does not say, yes, excellent poverty analysis. He tells them to give what they have. Bring the fish, bring the bread, act from abundance. Do not feed the lack of history. Give them your fish. That is the faith mechanics. Jesus was not doing motivational speaking. He was demonstrating collapse behavior. He was understanding that we collapse our history, we select our history. We do not worship the feared branch. Hold the better history. Act as if the better history is real every time you open your eyes. That is why he repeatedly attacks fear, not because fear is impolite, but because fear has created power in the wrong direction. This idea is not only Christian. The major traditions all say the same thing. Buddhism says the mind perceives experience. What we dwell on shapes the world we suffer inside. Hindu thought teaches that one becomes shaped by faith and inner orientation. Islam teaches that change begins within the soul, not merely outside in the circumstances. Judaism repeatedly treats the heart, intention, and spoken blessings as spiritually consequential. Christianity says faith can move mountains. Different languages, same thing. Mine is not decorative. Expectation matters. Faith is another term for expectation. I say expectation in my math, but it's because faith is a polluted word. Fear miscreates. Faith aligns. Now we must say something. This does not mean every suffering person personally caused their suffering. A sick child did not manifest illness because she had bad thoughts, that she worried. That is vulgar. A starving child did not individually choose hunger. The Born-Hilborn interpretation is not a blame machine. It is a history selection model. Collapse is collective, distributed, nested, and spread across space-time. We're inside Wigner's friend within Wigner's friend within Wigner's friend. No observer stands outside the system. Every mind is nested inside larger minds, cultures, species, ancestors, futures, fears, prayers, habits, and histories. If we picture children starving in a third world country, we feed to that worry. We feed to their despair. We starve the children. Us. So suffering is not always traceable to one guilty thinker. It is the result of weighted histories. A child may suffer because entire civilizations have fed histories of scarcity, fear, indifference, violence, and separation. The child is not guilty. The child is caught inside the history adults help select. That is why responsibility matters more, not less. If thought has weight, then cynicism is not intelligence. Despair is not sophistication. Doom scrolling, fear-mongering is not prophecy. Worry is not love. Fear is not science. Panic is not moral seriousness. If thought has weight, then we're ethically required to discipline our imaginations, or at least distract. We shouldn't deny pain. We shouldn't ignore anger. We shouldn't pretend suffering is fake, but we should refuse to worship it. You don't have to allow the thoughts in. The thoughts come from external. Every thought that you receive, it comes from external. And it's your job to either accept the thought or not accept the thought. If you get a thought to be cruel, you don't have to accept that thought. That's free will. That's where your free will comes in. You can refuse that thought. You have to discipline your mind. That's self-discipline is important. You have to discipline your imagination. You have to distract from worry. There's a difference between seeing a problem and feeding it. If a child is hungry, feed the child. Do not sit there visualizing famine with theatrical sadness and call yourself compassionate. Feed the child. Select the fed child history with action, expectation, and love. If someone is sick, care for them. Do not mentally rehearse their funeral every morning and call it realism. Hold the healing history while doing the practical work. The worry is doing the damage. Faith is not passive. Faith is expectation plus action. Faith breeds the branch you want reality to inhabit. This is why joy matters. Joy is not childish decoration. Joy is alignment with a better collapse. Follow your bliss. Joy is what the soul feels when it is moving with the deeper future rather than shrinking into fear. You can be guided by it. Joy in love, joy in food, joy in music, joy in learning, joy in creation, joy in attraction, joy in kindness. These are not accidental chemical rewards in a meaningless machine. They are signs of histories being reinforced. Pleasure exists because certain future histories need present beings to keep choosing life. The joy of attraction keeps lineages moving. The joy of feeding others keeps bodies alive. The joy of teaching keeps memories moving. The joy of art keeps imaginations open. The joy of faith keeps the better branches lit. This is why worry is satanic in the mechanical sense. Do not hear that as the cartoon devil with the red pajamas and a pitchfork. Hear it as a function. Satan is the voice of the feared history. Satan says, collapse the worst branch. Faith says, hold the better one. Satan says, picture the failure until it's inevitable. Faith says, see the good, then act like it can arrive. Satan says, protect yourself by rehearsing disaster. Faith says, stop feeding hell with your imagination. That is the real battle. The evil suffering problem becomes clearer once we stop imagining God as an external dictator. In the hell-born mathematics, God is the highest coherent future of mind. God is the consciousness, what consciousness becomes when personhood is widened, purified, and stabilized into a greater scale. God is future mind leaning backward with love, with gratitude and love, trying to weight histories towards His life, joy, intelligence, courage, beauty, and continuity. That's why people in the afterlife feel love. They're feeling it from the future. The gratitude, they're collapsed in so many layers of gratitude. They're surrounded by love. We're surrounded by love. We're built from love. We're not puppets. We're participating souls. We give the love backwards. The future leans. It does not always shove. We can turn away thoughts. We can feed the fear. We can collapse ugly histories, or we can turn them away. We can worry, resent, despair, obey, panic, and then stare at the ruins if they drop from heaven and blame God. That is a tragedy. God does not create suffering as a hobby. Suffering arises when conscious beings feed histories that cannot carry joy. God is the better future calling. Worry is a refusal to trust it. Now, why would God make sick children? In this model, God is not making sick children. A shared universe of weighted expectations has selected histories where sickness still appears because fear, separation, ignorance, cruelty, and scarcity have been given tremendous weight across time. God is the pressure towards healing. God is the future in which those children are whole. God is the history we should be helping to select. The better question is not why did God do this? The better question is why did we keep feeding the branch when this happens? Not individual blame, collective responsibility, species responsibility. Soul responsibility. History selection responsibility. The old religious command, do not fear, is not emotional advice, it is physics. In moral language, do not fear. Do not fear because fear has weight. Do not worry because worry selects a path that leads to it. Do not despair because despair is worship of the dead branch. Have faith because faith is how the soul cooperates with the highest future. Gratitude is the most obvious hack to love. This also explains why suffering can still become meaningful without being good. You need bad to have good. You can't have a world with just ice cream and no broccoli. Suffering itself is not holy. A starving child is not for the best. A sick child is not a lesson prop. Anyone who says that should be gently removed from the microphone and given a sandwich and removed from the room. But suffering can be transformed when souls refuse to let pain select the next worst history. Compassion is a counter-collapse. Healing is a counter-collapse. Forgiveness is a counter-collapse. Courage is a counter-collapse. Gratitude is a counter-collapse. These are not greeting card emotions. They are branch-selected behaviors. They add weight to the better histories. This is why the soul must be trained. A soul is a personified Markov, M-A-R-K-O-V blanket, an inside and an outside, a self-boundary, a living point of comparison. It receives thought pressure from possible history. It feels fear, longing, faith, memory, temptation, love. Its task is to choose which thoughts to obey. And you don't have to obey all your thoughts. That is free will. Free will is not the absence of influence. Free will is the power to reject a thought. That's what meditation is truly about, and I'm the only person on the planet right now teaching you the true purpose of meditation is to avoid thoughts because they don't come from your brain. They don't come from your mind. They come from the larger CPT ledger. A fearful thought may arrive, a cruel thought may arrive, a hopeless thought may arrive, a lust for disaster may arrive, wearing the mask of worry. You do not have to obey it. That is the soul's job, not to control every event, not to magically prevent every pain, but to refuse to feed hell. And here is where the theory becomes enormous. The Hillborn interpretation does not only address suffering, it explains why many worlds is unnecessary. We do not need every possible world to exist. We need one history selected by weight. It explains thought. Thoughts are not brain exhaust. They are local experience of weighted selection. It explains memory. Memory is not proven to be stored inside tissue. In this model, memory belongs to selected history as CPT ledger symmetry. It explains evolution. Future forms help weight the ancestral histories that build them. It explains desire. Desire is future coherence, pulling on the present. It explains sex drive. Future observers need ancestors to continue. So continuation becomes joyful, urgent, and powerful. It explains religion. Religion is not superstition when properly understood. It is the discipline of expectation. It explains sin. Sin is not rule-breaking for the amusement of a cosmic accountant. Sin is feeding histories that shrink consciousness. It explains salvation. Salvation is alignment with the highest future mind. It explains evil. Evil is not a rival God. Evil is misweighted collapse. Evil is worry, fear, hatred, resentment, and despair, made strong enough to select suffering. That is why the cure is not merely belief. The cure is disciplined expectation, mental discipline and training. See the better world, speak the better world, act toward the better world, act as if, refuse the emotion. Do not rehearse disaster if the panic were virtue. Do not call despair wisdom. Do not call worry love. Love does not worry a child into health. Love holds health, then acts. Faith does not ignore the hungry. Faith feeds them. Hope does not deny suffering. Hope refuses to let suffering be the final author of history. That is how we resolve the evil suffering problem. Not by excusing God, by understanding God. God is the highest future coherence of mind. God does not want our fear. God wants our cooperation. The universe is not asking us to passively watch horror and then file complaints against heaven. The universe is asking us to stop feeding horror with expectation. This is faith mechanics. Quantum mechanics and faith mechanics mean the same thing when you understand that quantum mechanics selects history with faith. Expectation. This is the Bourne-Hilborn rule. This is the Bourne-Hilborn rule as applies to suffering in this video. Quantum mechanics gives possible histories. Expectations give them weight. We need a selector, and there is no one now moment in the universe. To select one universe from the ever many, we need to have a selection. Collapse selects one history. Worry weights the feared history. Faith weights the healed history. Action anchors the selected history. Sort of. Love keeps it coherent. So when someone asks, why is there evil? Just tell them. Because consciousness has weight, and frightened consciousness can miscreate. And when they ask, where is God? Tell them, God is the better future pressing backward, asking us to stop feeding your nightmare. God is not absent. God is underweighted. So give God weight. Do not panic. Do not have dread. Prayer with faith, with gratitude, with courage, with joyful action. You can't die in a universe. You just follow your bliss. Refuse to rehearse hell. The alive cat history, the fed child history, the healed body history, the forgiven world history, and the awakened soul history deserve our weight. That is the answering. Suffering is not proof that God is dead. God is proof that history selection matters. And faith is how we stop donating reality to fear. I have other videos where I explain God deeper, what it is and how it works, and how God is. However, in the Bourne-Hilborn interpretation of quantum mechanics, worry is the root of all evil. It selects history with the less than best options. Sometimes people can only manifest a rock in a hard place. Daydream. Daydream carefully. A daydream is not escape. It is a seed offered to the universe. Expect gently, gratefully, without adding worry to the future. Even shadow has its place because contrast teaches light where to shine, but do not worship that shadow. Walk the middle path, the middle way. Wu way. Enough sort of deepen joy, enough faith to guide collapse, enough love to make the next history blessed. Thoughts are not from you. Thoughts are things you can act upon or move in with. Choose wisely. That's the only free will you're allowed. Choosing your thoughts. That's the only free will you're allowed. The end.